So, Reddit. If you're watching this video, you're probably pretty familiar with Reddit. After all, how do you know about Ask Me Anything if you aren't familiar with the website? The thing is being familiar with Reddit as a platform to, I don't know, find cat pictures, and as a platform to advertise on, or to, what the purpose of this video is, host an AMA for your brand, are very different things. After all, what better way to advertise your brand than to host and Ask Me Anything? Anybody can come in and ask you questions about your brand. There's basically no other opportunity that you could possibly have where your brand would be center stage and everyone just coming in to talk about you. Yet, that can go very wrong if you're not careful. And that's why this guide today is going to guide you through the whole process of hosting an AMA so you know what to expect, what to avoid, and to start off with, if it's even right for you and your brand. First of all, if you haven't already, please go check out the blog post that goes along with this video. I am going to intentionally not try to touch on too much of the same stuff in this video as I do in the blog post, so you should probably read through that first before coming to this video so you essentially have a good grip on the basics. So if you read the blog post, you should have just a pit of fear in your stomach when it comes to hosting anything on Reddit or really doing any kind of Reddit marketing. Now, I don't say this as someone that doesn't like the platform. In fact, I have personally been on Reddit for the last 8 years, and so I'm pretty familiar with the platform. I love the platform. I don't really do social media on my personal time all that often, but I do spend a lot of time on Reddit. Now, that gives me some good perspective as both a marketer and as someone that actually spends time on the platform and has been part of the community far longer than I've actually marketed to the community. The thing about Reddit is it's not like Twitter, it's not like Facebook or Instagram. On those platforms, you can find an influencer and pay them money and they'll talk about your product. Alternatively, you can just advertise directly, and while you can do that on Reddit, it's not quite as effective as more organic methods. And this is for two reasons. The first is just the kind of people that use Reddit. I mean, Reddit's user base is not Twitter, it's not Facebook. Typically, the user base of Reddit is going to be more informed, it's going to be more curious, and people on Reddit are also anonymous. And while people can be anonymous on Twitter and Facebook too, it's not quite the same thing. On Reddit, anybody can just kind of pop up and start asking you questions, or anybody else for that matter. And this creates a unique sort of experience for brands that are doing AMAs. There's nowhere else you really can talk to people and get their genuine opinions about your brand. And not just their genuine opinions, but really interact with them. It kind of looks silly what goes on Twitter between some of the bigger accounts, the more well-known kind of like, we're cool on Twitter sort of people. It's nothing like that on Reddit. And one of the reasons for that is because there's a genuine sort of honesty, I guess you could say. There's an expectation of realness on Reddit. When people try to put on airs or jump on the latest meme or just generally try to look cool, more or less, it doesn't really go well on Reddit because the kind of user base there is really good at sniffing out that kind of thing. So yeah, this brings us back to that question. Who is Reddit for? Who is good at hosting an AMA? Who should host an AMA? And really, it comes down to two things. The first thing, and this is really an important one, is your brand actually interesting? Are you doing something interesting? The easiest way to figure this out, because let's face it, you're probably a little biased. It's your brand. It's your baby. You're not going to answer this question truthfully, so I'm going to have to rip it out of you. But if you would go into the street right now, like right outside your office, your home, wherever you happen to be, and you were to find the first 5 people that you saw, maybe make it the first 10 people, the first 15, 20, number doesn't really matter as much, and you asked all of them, hey, this is what my business does. Do you care? If the instantaneous response was like a shrug or a no, then you might not be a good fit. Now, if a couple of those people seem interested, then yeah, Reddit might be the place for you. But if every single person, except maybe 1 out of 100 people, or like 1 out of 50 people, just isn't that interested, then probably an AMA isn't a right fit for you. So then who is an AMA a fit for? Well, really, we find that the kind of companies that are a good fit for Reddit are companies that are doing something that's new, something that's exciting, or something that is just controversial in a good way, not a bad way. So, for example, if you are a company that you create some kind of software that's innovative and does something that no other software does, and when I say software, I mean something that is not business to business, but business to consumer. The average person would want to use the software or could theoretically think about using it in their life. If you're doing something that involves the sex industry at all, so maybe you do porn, maybe you do some kind of sex toys or lube, or maybe you give advice, anything like that. Relationship stuff, I would also put into that category. Those are all things that people are going to be interested in. Likewise, if you do something that's politically engaging, say you are working for a nonprofit, that you're doing something that has to do with the environment or helping people in other countries or even in the United States or anything like that, that's something that people are going to want to know about and they're going to want to be involved in. On the other hand, if you are a regular B2B company or you do something like real estate or just, maybe you do really basic stuff that consumers might care about, like cleaning products. Unless you're really innovating and creating a new cleaning product that is going to blow everyone away, you're probably not going to find much of an audience on Reddit. Now, I did say there were two things, though. It's not just if you're interesting, it's also, and this is really important, if you aren't too controversial. So there's lots of industries that might be interesting, but also might create controversy. So if you have a company that just went through a big public relations catastrophe, you probably don't want to have an AMA. Also, if you're doing something that's political, but maybe isn't the right fit for a younger demographic, or at least a more tech-savvy demographic, then Reddit probably isn't the spot for you. If you are someone that is against net neutrality, Reddit probably isn't the spot for you. You probably wouldn't want to open up that hive onto your business. It's probably not the best idea. Likewise, if you as a business are maybe someone that Reddit just doesn't like for any reason. So if you, and I would suggest doing this, go on Reddit, go over here to the search box on the side and search for your business. Make sure you're searching on the whole site and not just ask me anything. When you do this, you might find out some stuff about your brand. Maybe it's liked on Reddit. Maybe it's hated on Reddit. You really need to know that going in. Now, with that said, I really don't want to scare you away from Reddit. I know that everything I just said can be a little bit, terrifying, but trust me, if you think your brand is a good fit and you're being honest with yourself and you follow the steps in this guide and you're extremely careful and you plot everything out, it's going to go fine. You just have to be honest with yourself and you just have to make sure that you follow the steps that I present. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's start talking about the actual steps to hosting a successful AMA. Let's go. All right, so first things first, the AMA that I have up right now, this is actually an AMA that we ran about a month ago for Astroglide. This was an AMA that was actually extremely successful, as you can see. We have like 1,600 and some comments, 8,000 some upvotes, a pretty high percentage of upvotes here, almost 80%. This went extremely well. It went like so well that like I'm probably right now I'm going to pop up some graphics on the screen so you can just see the huge jump in traffic that we got from hosting this AMA. And I don't want you to focus too much on that though. The traffic's important. The traffic was good. It's fine. But really AMAs are not just about how much traffic that you're getting. It's also about the brand lift that you get from them. Realistically, while all the traffic and the people talking about your brand and all this other stuff, blah, 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 blah. It's all great. It's great for SEO. It's just great for getting your brand out there. A lot of the use of an AMA is actually not going to show up directly on your analytics. It's not going to show up from the links that are in the header here or the links that we drop to blog posts for Astroglide down here. It's not going to show up there. And the reason for that is because a lot of people, when they see something on Reddit, they're not going to immediately go and click these links. They're going to just have it in their head. If you're familiar with marketing at all, the idea of like a billboard, people always wonder like, how does a billboard work, sort of thing. Well, it's kind of like that with Astroglide. Someone sees a billboard, someone sees a commercial, the advertising gets in their head, and they think about it later, or they just get curious, and when they get home, they think about it. This is something really big that happened with Astroglide, where we saw a lot of traffic coming in this way, but for the next 2 weeks or so, we actually saw a pretty big jump in traffic from people literally coming in on the keyword Astroglide. And there was nothing else going on at this time that could have really driven that much traffic to their website. It was just this Reddit made a bunch of people search for Astroglide. It made a bunch of people aware of the brand that weren't previously aware of it. And that threw a bunch of people that were maybe more willing and more familiar with the brand than, say, the average customer, which increases the chance that they're likely to convert. Now, the reason I want us to look at this AMA is because I feel like before we get into the actual steps, I'm sorry, I know I'm torturing you, I want you to know what good looks like. And what good looks like is really important. And so the first thing that I want you to pay attention to is the title, right? This is one of the first things that we're going to talk about in a little bit, but you can see this title. Every single word here has been chosen for a reason. Same thing for the biography, the initial post. Right here. This has been chosen for a reason. The reason why all these words are here, the reason why some things are bolded, the reason why some things are linked, everything has been chosen for a reason. We'll get into all of that. However, all of these things and the way that this AMA was set up led to its success. A lot of people might think that hosting an AMA is a bit of a crapshoot, that it's all luck, but that's really not the case. If you put all your cards on the table in the right spots at the right time, you're probably going to have a pretty good chance of winning, right? Like, I want to be clear. You can do everything right, and an AMA can still not go anywhere. But the thing is that's if you do everything right, I want to say you have like an 85% chance of success. If you truly are interesting and you do everything that's in the guide, you're going to have some success. All right, so planning for AMA, step one, right? You're going to want to start planning for AMA super early. As you can see here, I suggest breaking out your planning schedule into 3 buckets, but the first one is 6 weeks out. When you plan for an AMA, you don't want this to be a last-minute thing. Treat it like a campaign, basically. Start 6 weeks out, then start to refine some stuff 3 to 4 weeks out, and then finally get to a spot 1 week out where you're basically pretty sure that this is what you want to do. And we're going to break down the specific things you want to do in each one of these steps. But right now, get out Google Docs, Word doc, pen and paper, whatever. Get it out and just put it in front of you. This is step one. Step one is just thinking to yourself, assuming that you're 6 weeks out right now, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So in 6 weeks, that's what we're going to focus on. All right, so 6 weeks out. To fill this particular bucket of what you should be doing, we're going to ask some questions just off the bat. So the first is, when is your AMA? When you're hosting your AMA, I mean the date and the time, the date of the week, all this stuff. This is something that you need to consider, and we need to be precise about. So this is the part where we're going to get into some stuff that wasn't in the blog post, and for good reason. So we're going to talk about date and time right now, and this is going to be a bit of a tangent, but I hope you'll stick with me. So date and time matters quite a bit when we're talking about planning an AMA, for the simple and sole reason that if you think about it, timing is really everything, right? So on Reddit, there is an algorithm, and this is an algorithm that basically decides if a post is successful or not. It decides how things climb the page on Reddit. And if you were to look at Reddit, and you would look at just a page on Reddit, and you would look at the upvote counts, you'll notice that the highest ones aren't always at the top. Now, the reason why this is because when something's posted to Reddit, Reddit doesn't expect it to have like 10,000 upvotes in 10 minutes, right? That wouldn't be realistic. However, Reddit knows if something got 10,000 upvotes really quickly, then it's probably really important and it's going to climb it up the page, probably ahead of things that were maybe have more upvotes, but say didn't get them as fast, or might have even, the same amount, but didn't get them as fast. Now, you want to try and game this as much as possible. And loosely, how the Reddit algorithm works is this. For every hour that passes, it's expected that you get an increasingly larger number of upvotes before the system kind of drops you. Like, you get essentially a little mark on the post, not literally, you don't see it anywhere, but the post itself gets this little benefit where it's treated explicitly as new and exciting content, which means it gets a bonus where it's going to be seated above other content for a certain amount of time. Now, these breakpoints, the best I can figure out at least, tend to be something along the lines of, in an hour, it's expected that you can acquire 10 upvotes. In 2 hours, it's expected somewhere between 25 to 100. After 3 hours, it's expected that you should be able to get 100 to we'll say 250 or so. After 3 or 4 hours, that goes up to 500. And after 5 hours, it's generally thought that increase by 100 until you get to about 8 to 10 hours or so, about which point you should have expected to basically amass at least 1,000 to 1,500 plus upvotes. And the reason why I'm giving a range here is because A, we don't really know for sure what the algorithm is, and B, and this is really the most important ones, it's going to be different depending on the day. So here is basically the best time to post on Reddit. So the first thing that you need to know is that there's a difference between posting your AMA and hosting it, we'll say. So posting your AMA is literally making the thread. That is step one. And then hosting it is when the AMA started. If you remember back to the Astroglide AMA we were just talking about, in the description, what you might have seen is that you might have noticed rather that it started and was posted at 2 different times with multiple hours between them. That was intentional. That was not a planning mishap. That was intentional. And there's a reason for this. So you want to try and get your AMA posted pretty early in the day. You want to try and time it for around 8 to 10 Eastern Time AM. Now, the reason why you want to do that is because that is going to be what I like to call the first wave. And this is generally at this time of day, people are not commenting on things, more or less. They sometimes are, but they're not super taking part in the conversations. They're more just browsing through on their phones. They're getting ready to go to work. They're stuck in traffic. They're, on their laptop before they get out the door. All of this kind of stuff is just, they're not really engaging, but they are reading Reddit. And this mostly, you'll notice I'm talking about East Coast American workers. And that is the first biggest group of people, the big traffic group that you're kind of targeting. That particular group is likely to upvote your post if they think it's interesting, but they're probably not going to comment in it. So this is really helpful because it means that if you post something and your title's interesting, once again, getting to that bit, then you'll be able to see that it's getting some upvotes. They'll say, oh, that's interesting. I want to check in on that later, and they'll upvote it. They're probably not going to comment in it. They're probably not going to drop comments in it. They might, but it's not going to be a large number. Now, what you want to do is have your AMA start at around 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Now, the reason why that is the case, because that's right around lunchtime. And because it's right around lunchtime, that is when people are taking their lunch breaks. It's when people have a break during the day to essentially actually browse Reddit again and see and answer questions or ask their questions or comment on questions. And so right around the time that your AMA is starting, people will actually be able to interact with it in real time. Now, this is really important because oftentimes one of the things you risk when you have your AMA, say, posted at 9 a.m. and then starting at 1 p.m. is you risk people coming into your AMA and going, oh, there's nothing interesting here, and leaving. So you want to kind of keep it relatively close together, but you really want to have it so maybe plan it so like when people upvote it, it's, that period, if you think of like just the initial this is posted, I'm just hoping for upvotes and not comments, you want that to kind of stop around 10 a.m. and then you want around like say 11 a.m. to transition into people that are starting to comment on it. And essentially that is the flow that you want to hit. Now, another thing for timing is we're talking about East Coast workers. However, these times also line up so that West Coast workers, as well as Europeans who are coming home from work at the day, will more or less see a crossover in activity around that noon time slot. And this is great. So you're going to get that East Coast bump in the morning. Then you're going to get a West Coast bump of upvotes in addition to a couple comments, much like with East Coast in the morning, and this could be West Coast around midday. And then you're also going to get Europeans coming in, same thing. They just finished work, and so they have a lot of time to kind of get active in the conversation. And basically from that period on, if you set everything up right, you should have a large period of activity from basically, say, 12 to 8 that night, or something along those lines. And this should hopefully continuously propel your AMA up the page. Now, time isn't everything. Date is also important. So what is the best date? What is the best date of the week for you to host your AMA? So couple things to consider. In the blog post, I specifically call out someone who says that the middle of the week is the best. I cannot disagree with this more. In the post, I have to be like, pretty, yes, I disagree, but that is really, really wrong. Do not host your AMA in the middle of the week. We have data that we have gathered, and actually it wouldn't be that hard for you to get this data too, as some subreddits make it public. But generally, it looks like kind of like a smiley face in traffic curves. So Monday, traffic spikes, and then it slowly goes down through Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday, it comes up. Now, depending on your product, the weekend can be a good idea or a bad idea. If it's something business related, then the week is where you want to stay. If it's something that might be considered fun, so for example, when we hosted our Astroglide AMA, they're a lube company, so we decided to put that on Friday. Now, the reason for that is because weekend and traffic on Reddit is not something to just ignore. It's just that it tends to not be as high. However, if you have a product like something that is related to sex, that is going to be still browsed and people are still going to be interested and wanting to take part in that conversation on the weekend. And so if you can get something kind of set up on a Friday so that it gets a lot of traffic and that rolls into the weekend, you're going to have a great time, especially because if you can manage to get a success on a Friday afternoon, what that is going to do is people don't host AMAs typically on the weekends, and so that your successful AMA is going to sit at the top of the page. And with that Astroglide AMA I sent you or showed before, what you might have noticed is, well, I guess you couldn't see this. It's you don't necessarily see what we see, or weren't necessarily there at the time. But from Friday afternoon to Sunday night, and when I say Sunday night, I mean 11 p.m. at Sunday night. There that Sunday, it was number 3. It hit number 1 on Friday. It stayed there all of Saturday, and then Sunday it started to decline, and then Monday I think it dropped to number 6, and it started to go below the fold. But for 3 days, it was at the very top of AMA, which is phenomenal, right? So yeah, that's what to think about when it comes to timing. If you were to throw something at Wednesday, or I would say anywhere between Tuesday and Thursday, not ideal. My personal opinion, actually no, I take that back. Tuesday is fine, Thursday is not. So I would say you want to target Monday, Tuesday, or Friday. Those are the days of choice. Start having your AMA posted somewhere between, probably I would say 9 and 10 is the best. Anywhere from 8 to 10 could work. And then have it so it's actually starting to get active somewhere between 11 and 1. And yeah, after that, it's just watching it go. So next one, who is answering questions? This seems like a simple one, but it's really not a simple question. And you can see right below that, will you answer questions, right? For some people, for some brands, you'll have multiple people answering questions. Now, this isn't the case with Astroglide, but it is the case with some of the other AMAs we've hosted in the past, where there's like a team, right? Likewise, if you're an agency watching this video, it might behoove you to actually like make people think that you are your client, if that makes sense. And the reason why we say that is because as marketing people, you might have a better understanding of Reddit than they do. And so you might be able to catch things that they don't, and you might be able to filter out questions that you know they shouldn't answer, that kind of thing. Or rather, I should say that they can get away not answering. You shouldn't try to filter out too many, right? But yeah, figuring this out, who's going to answer questions, is really important. And one of the reasons why is because you want to make sure that this person is prepped. And you can see the sidebar here. I have prepping questions. And this is one of those things that you want to seriously consider is really early on, 6 weeks out, think to yourself, what are people going to ask us? Right? What are people going to ask us? And obviously, this is hard to predict. You never know what people are going to ask you truthfully, but you can prep for it. Think of it like debate prep, right? If you know you're going into debate, you can't necessarily predict what all the other side's arguments are going to be, but you can kind of know that some are coming. And so for Astroglide, for example, we know some of the major issues, the complaints people have against the brand. We also know things that people are probably going to want to talk about, right? One of the things that the person that we're having interviewed for the AMA is a sex therapist, a relationship expert sort of person. And so we know that there's going to be questions about like, oh, I'm dealing with infidelity, or, what do you do when your sex drive and your partner's sex drive don't line up, right? All of these kinds of questions, we know they're coming. And so what we can do is ahead of time, we can kind of theory those out. What's the best way we can answer this question? What blog post can we answer for this question, or can we like stick in there and link to for this question? Is there other helpful material that we can have? And we'll do this the reason why we do it 6 weeks in advance is because we'll come up with a running doc of questions that we pass around to our team of writers to just think of ones. And our social media team, basically anybody that can throw something in. And if you don't work in an agency, ask around your office. What do people ask you all the time about your particular product, about your company? Figure it out, write it down, and then sketch out some answers. Now, you never want to look like you're copying, pasting answers from like a document, but it's completely fine and completely okay to go in and say like, hey, we have this answer prepped, and you can just copy paste it and then tweak it a little bit for the specifics of the question that's being answered. And while you obviously don't want to do this for every single question, if your AMA is successful, like our Astroglide one was, you're going to have 1,600 comments. You're not going to have time to answer all those questions. They're going to be there forever. So to help answer more faster and get more engagement, you can have these really long answers basically just already set, ready to go. And if someone comes in, they ask you that question that you think you're going to get, you have it ready, and then you can spend time answering the more unique questions that you didn't anticipate being answered, or being asked rather. How long will your AMA be? Well, this is another big one. This is another big one that you should really consider. So Dr. Jess, she is the therapist that was being interviewed, you could say, in the AMA that we were hosting, and she's a champ. I can't say enough good things about Dr. Jess because she was the one that was answering the questions for her AMA, and she was originally supposed to only be there for an hour or two. She ended up answering questions until like midnight, I think. Just because she was like, I don't want anyone to be disappointed. I want to answer everyone's questions. And this is what we see. If your AMA is going to be successful, a lot of people will feel obligated to keep answering questions because honestly, they like just interacting with people that are curious about whatever it is they do, their products, whatever. But generally, it's a good idea to have this planned out, have it in mind. If you are an agency and you are answering the questions, you don't want to be in a situation where it's 5 o'clock, and whoever's answering the question starts to look at the clock and go, okay, come on, we gotta get through this. We gotta get through this. And you don't want to awkwardly cut it off either, right? If it's more successful than you think. So it's a good idea to think to yourself, all right, our team is going to answer questions for this long. That also gives you a good amount of time if your AMA is successful, or depending on the variability of how successful it is. You can figure out how much time you need to know to realistically answer all of those questions, rather than spending maybe 30 minutes answering a question. It might not be the smartest thing in the world if you have 1,000 questions to answer. Whereas if you only get 50, but they're really good questions, you might want to take the time to individually answer all of those in as much detail as you can. Finally, the last thing to consider, question to ask, I should say, not consider, 6 weeks out is, are you promoting anything? Now, I assume you are. That's why you're hosting an AMA, but you need to know ahead of time. And you need to know because it helps to have those links handy. And it also helps to maybe set up a landing page just for Reddit. And that stuff takes time. It also, you can do a little bit of market research to see maybe which one of your products, which one of your pages is going to be the most successful on Reddit. And additionally, you can also see if any of your content has really been successful on Reddit, because then you can go and you can kind of boost that, right? You can say, I know this content works on Reddit, so let's do it more. And you can figure that out. This is a tactic that I feel is absolutely crucial to ensure the success of any AMA, but it's important not to overdo it. So what you need to do at least 6 weeks out, and honestly, this should be considered beforehand. If you have anyone on your staff that has an active Reddit account, this is the time to pat them on the shoulder and see if they're willing to help you out. Day of, you want these accounts to be able to come into your AMA within, I would say, starting within 5 minutes and then going as about 30 minutes in. You want them to drop questions, some questions that you already know are going to hit for your brand. Now, I want to be clear, and I want to be extremely clear here. You want to make these legitimate questions. You want to make these questions that are going to be believable, that someone would actually ask your brand if they weren't just like a paid shill for your brand. I cannot emphasize enough. And in fact, right now on the screen, you can see me scrolling down an AMA and going to a comment and highlighting a comment. This is an actual AMA that happened, I think, a month before we did our Astroglide AMA that I'm featuring in this video. And you can see this question is not actually something that a real human would say. This is very clearly marketing copy, and Reddit sniffs it out. So you don't want to do that. But yeah, back to me, back to my face. So you really want to come into this asking genuine questions. The point of these questions isn't to set up your brand for an easy win. It's 100% just to get some new stuff in there. You want comments in there. You want people talking about your company. You want like activity in your thread. The worst thing that can happen is a thread that's just nothing's happening in it, right? And so having someone ask questions helps prevent this from happening because you have some activity in there. Now, to be clear, what I don't want you to do is use these accounts to try and manipulate the votes on the thread itself. So like if someone asks you a hardball question that you want to answer, don't use all these accounts to downvote that person. These are literally just for asking questions and nothing else. All right, so 3 to 4 weeks out. But by the way, sidebar, I realized that it keeps keeps switching between looking like I live in a cave and also like I'm just getting blown out by the sun to the side. It actually is a beautiful sunny day outside right now, but I'm just desperately trying not to get everything washed out because I'm sitting right in front of like 2 monitors that are just bright white lights. So if you've been noticing that, I promise you TCF does not live in a cave. The SEO lifestyle that we all live means that we can live wherever we choose to in the world. I just happen to choose to live in a place right now where you either have blinding sun or it looks like you're in a cave. Besides that, this is 3 to 4 weeks out, and what you're going to want to do first is you're going to want to contact the Reddit AMA moderators. So if you're not familiar with how this works, the AMA moderators on the subreddit, you can see here on the side, there is a calendar, and in that calendar, there is basically a schedule of all the AMAs that are coming up. And so you want to get included on that calendar. If you message the moderators, you can get included if you send them enough time, or if you give them enough warning. Usually 3 to 4 weeks is plenty of time. You can choose to do this a little earlier. I find that 3 to 4 weeks is the perfect time to do it. Then you can also look at the calendar yourself and kind of get a feel for what's coming. And I would say that this is an optional step too. It's always good to have more eyes on your AMA and more people to be aware of it. But in my own experience, not a lot of people pay attention to the calendar. So, it doesn't hurt to do it. But if this is something that you either can't get included for one reason or another, they don't feel that you are a good fit for the calendar, or your person that you're representing or the brand isn't famous enough, then that's totally fine. However, what you're definitely going to want to do is to start mentioning your AMA on social media. This is something that's super important for reasons that I hope are obvious, right? If you have other social media channels, or your client does, you want them to start talking about, the AMA that's coming. However, you don't want to do it too much. So 3 to 4 weeks out is about a good place to start. Usually 4 weeks out, you can mention it once or twice. 3 weeks, you can slowly ramp it up, and so on and so on and so on. You don't want to go too crazy. You don't want to burn people out and make them think the AMA either has already happened, or just kind of give that nonstop barrage of, hey, this is happening. A lot of times with AMAs, people discover them like in the moment, and so you want to kind of preserve that feeling, but at the same time, you want people to know that it is going to be happening, because there are people that are probably waiting to ask your brand questions, or ask whoever you're representing questions, or ask yourself questions, depending on what it is you're having an AMA for. And by kind of giving them enough time, enough of a heads up, you ensure that day of you're going to have an audience. Finally, 1 to 2 weeks out. So what are you going to do when you're basically getting close to the day that you're actually going to host your AMA? So you're going to want to ramp up your social. You're going to want to talk to your friends, get your proof ready, and check the schedule. So breaking all these down, ramping up social, you should be posting once a day, probably once every other day. 2 weeks out, 1 week out, start posting every day about it. The day before, go really heavy. Make sure people know that this is happening. And day of, make sure that you're promoting the AMA. And if you have a really active social team, or you're feeling extra courageous that day, I shouldn't say courageous, if you're feeling extra motivated, we'll say, go and start, when questions are getting answered, day of the AMA, start like screenshotting them or quoting them, and then putting them on Twitter, the answers, and then linking to the questions themselves. You'll get a lot more interaction that way, and you'll maybe even fish out some upvotes from people that otherwise didn't know the AMA was going on. Talking to your friends. So you want to start to talk to your friends about 2 weeks out. Find out who else has Reddit accounts that you know. Start to get people ready that know that the AMA is going to happen, and you're going to need some help to make it a success. If they can get in that thread and ask questions, if they can start upvoting, if they can start responding to other people who are asking questions natively, then that is 100% what you want. It's going to be more activity, and it's going to be organic activity, which is 100% what you want to look the best, and also to really boost your numbers and get your AMA to raise up the page really quickly. You want to get your proof ready. Now, every AMA typically has a proof. The proof is just, this is something that proves to the audience that you are who you say you are. This can be something as simple of tweeting the day of the AMA and saying, hey, Reddit AMA is coming. The link is here. So once you post the actual thread itself, you just link to it on your official Twitter account or your Facebook account, whatever. And then in the AMA itself, you link back to that tweet and say, hey, no, this is me. You can see I was talking about this very thread. You can have a picture that you can just put up that says, it's you and your face, just like, hey, it's me. And like, AMA, ask me anything, on it. That's fine too, with the date and time. Sometimes for something that's very specific, it can help to have a picture of your team, your whole team, with maybe holding something up in front of your building, something that other people wouldn't be able to fake. Some people that have very specific professions that are asking AMAs, like nurses or doctors involved in very specific places or fields, or journalists, will often have their ID that they can show off to prove this is me. All of those are totally fine. And you want to make sure that you have that ready, because you're going to want that to be within 5 minutes of actually posting the AMA. You want that proof to go up if it's not up beforehand. Then you have check the schedule. So 2 weeks out, you want to check the Reddit schedule, because you want to make sure that there's not going to be any crossover. Obviously, when you're planning your AMA and you're picking the date for it, you want to keep your eyes open to make sure you're not going to a date that's too crowded. But over time, that can change, right? So you can have people that just pile on your day. Figure out what you're going to do about that. If it's industries that you don't think is going to cross over with yours, maybe continue going. If you've already put out the advertisements for 2 or 3 weeks that this is when the AMA is going to be, it's too late to move it. Don't try it. That's not a good idea. Instead, just kind of be mentally prepared and readjust what you think success will look like. Also, don't be afraid to get other AMAs involved. And if another AMA is going on your day, see if you can read that AMA to see if there's any trends that you could pick up on that might be helpful for you. And generally just keep your eyes open in general. Follow the subreddit that has to do with your brand. That has to do with like the specific sort of thing that you do. For Astroglide, there's a sex subreddit. There is like a sex toys. There's a lube subreddit. So you follow those, you know what's going on. This helps you kind of predict the kind of questions that you're going to see day of. So just start keeping an eye on that, keep a finger on the pulse of the community. And, finally, a couple last things here as far as prep work goes is you want to make sure your team is totally prepared. You want to make sure that everyone's ready, everyone knows, everyone has their alarm set, everyone's going to be in the office on time. You have backup people. If one person can't make it, you have someone else that can be there. If something happens, if you're an agency and you're a client, you don't know if they might be a little sketchy. They might not know if they can have availability that day, even though you've planned it out, you've done your best. Make sure that you have backup plans, and make sure you have backup plans for your backup plans. The more prepared you can be, the better off your AMA is going to go 100% of the time. So yeah, let's start talking about execution now that we have the planning out of the way. So first things first, this section is probably going to be pretty quick because planning is really all about an AMA is. It's really just all planning. The execution part really isn't that complicated. And honestly, just by following best marketing practices, you can do all of these things. Yet, we're going to go through all of them. I realize some probably seem a little more obvious to me as someone that's used Reddit for a long time, but we're just going to go through everything here, and you'll be able to follow along pretty easy. So first off, we're going to use 2 posts here to kind of highlight good and bad. So bad over here is that post that we previously talked about before, and then good is the AMA that we just recently did. So yeah, let's talk about the first thing. So the first thing, and I mentioned the title, we're going to start with this first. When you're writing the title to your post, you want to do something that's going to capture people's attention, right? And what better way to capture someone's attention than to start with National Orgasm Day as next week? We knew this was going to be a good hook. We knew that, Reddit tends to like this kind of stuff, so why not throw it right out there? At the same time, we wanted to include the brand, Astroglide, and we wanted to make it clear that, kind of convey a sense of playfulness, a sense of, hey, we have our brand ambassador here to answer some questions for you. And that's kind of what we accomplish here. This is sort of what you want to mimic with yours. You want to have, something punchy and quick that started off. This can either be what you're famous for. It can be what makes you different. So if I know I said I would just use these. I'm going to open up a new thread here and open up. All right, so this is just a personal preference thing. I am going to go to old Reddit. And you can see here's some of the ones that are popular right now. I do autopsies, record them, live stream them, and photograph them by family consent. That's pretty successful, right? And you can see why. You kind of want to know what's going on there, right? Same thing. Hi, I'm Dr. Christine Mortier, of the Chief Medical Officer of the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. This only started an hour ago. It already has 40 comments, right? So it's pretty, it's popping, right? It's going out pretty well. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So that's doing, pretty all right for itself. You can see, let's see, what are some other successful ones that seem to be going on? All right. This one had 1,000 upvotes, still pretty successful. Was from yesterday, but it's still above the fold. My font size is blown up here to more mimic a 1080p screen, but this would be ahead if it wasn't for how strange it looks. So you can see we are Mary Phillips Sandy and Lizzie Jacobs, creators of the podcast Let's Talk About Cats. Reddit loves cats. They know that. It's right in front here, right? So you kind of get with these titles, it tells you, it's very descriptive, and it gets your attention. Ones that don't really kind of jump in front of you, you can see they kind of just fall down. This one is from an hour ago, only has 13 comments. I'm the director of a world-renowned museum and research center focused on the ancient Middle East. I would say that this guy probably, or girl, would have been probably better to do or have a title that kind of said, this is the specific foundation I work for, the specific museum I work for, or maybe, hey, I just discovered this thing in the Middle East, ask me about these artifacts or something like that. A little bit more eye-catching, right? Same thing for I'm a reporter from Mashable. I spent months looking for the safest places on the internet for kids. I would say that this would probably lead better with something like, did you know that the safest place for internet for kids is blank? Or you might not know that this place is unsafe for kids. Those probably would have been a little bit more eye-catching. Once again, it's all about just getting up in people's face, essentially, and jumping at them with something that's immediately grabbed their attention. Now, the thing here is this is the bad post, and you can see we are the team at Roan. Ask us anything. So this actually did well despite the 0 upvotes. That's for other reasons, which we'll get into. But this was totally fine. But one thing to kind of remember here, and this is a tiny little tweak, if you're doing an AMA on the actual AMA subreddit, you want something like this. If you're doing an AMA on another subreddit, this was on Frugal Male Fashion, it's cool to just say, hey, we're this team. People are probably going to know who you are already if you're on a very targeted subreddit. But like, you don't want to do that for the general AMA subreddit. You want something that's going to be eye-catching, that's going to really grab people if they don't know who you are. Then you can see in the actual description box, this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. So you can see we start off just talking about who the person is. So this is Dr. Jess, right? I already talked about her a little bit. We kind of put her credentials out there. And why you essentially should trust her, why she is interesting, why you should ask her anything. Then we have the event, the thing that we were essentially promoting. Astroglide did a National Orgasm Day sort of event kind of thing that was going on. And because of that, that's why we put it on this day. It's why everything was sort of targeted. But we wanted that to be front and center for the campaign. So that's kind of like the thing that we were promoting, to put it better. And kind of the campaign behind that, not enough Americans are having orgasms. I like to help change that. So this is where you kind of put the thing you're promoting and then why it's important to Reddit. So the thing we're promoting is National Orgasm Day. Why were we promoting it? Well, because not enough Americans are having orgasms and we want to change that. And we're going to do that by reaching out on Reddit. So that's kind of like thing you're promoting, followed by like the reason why it's important to Reddit. Then once again, kind of backing up, what we'll say is this opening paragraph here. This is, once again, the opening paragraph is why people should pay attention. Once again, why people should pay attention. You want to kind of keep, you don't want to make this section too long, but it's good to throw in an anecdote or two, or a hook. And hooks work well if you are really, really good at targeting them. And in fact, I just want to really bring attention to this one. So I travel extensively across the globe to work with couples, including royalty and presidential candidates. We included this in here because we knew someone was going to ask about it. And the very top question, you can see that was asked here, right? They quoted that and they asked a question about it. And look how many upvotes that got, right? And this ended up, Dr. Jess answered this. You can see that she got involved in the comments, but she 100% answers this question and gets a lot of upvotes herself. So this got a lot of attention just by including this little bit in here. So you can kind of seed the questions a little bit if you're smart about what you include in your bio, in your original post. So then the last thing that was here originally was this: I'll be here at 1 p.m. Eastern time to answer all your juiciest sex questions, AMA. So we just bolded this to make sure people would see. This was posted. We posted this at 10 a.m. and we wanted people to understand that at 1 p.m. that's when Dr. Jess would be here to start answering questions. And actually, while it said 1 p.m., she was actually in here about 20 minutes early answering questions. That wasn't planned. It's just that she had the time and we figured, why not? It can't hurt to start a little early. It's just that you want people to know generally questions are going to you're going to start to answer questions at this particular time. And then immediately after this is posted, you can see we have the verification tweet. And you can see this was the tweet that was posted, right? So she has, she join us as 1 p.m. EST, and then join us now. And she links to this specific post. So this is the verification. So she's verified. And what this meant is that this post over here actually got a little thing that was blinking that said it was live and also that it was verified, which was great. Redditors like to see that and we like to provide it best we can. Specific gamut that we tried to pull here is by including a lot of sex words, more or less, in this AMA. And the reason for that was really simple. We wanted the NSFW tag. The NSFW tag can actually get your AMA hidden in a lot of cases. We were willing to risk that it was worth getting hidden if it meant that people would see the NSFW tag and it would kind of serve as a beacon as, ooh, look at this. It's a little scandalous. And that seemed to have worked out really well for us, obviously, by the amount of upvotes that we got. So that's a specific strategy. It's not going to apply in every case, but anything that you can do to make your AMA stick out while still appealing to Reddit's demographic is going to be something that you're going to want to do. Additionally, some other stuff that we wanted to throw in here. As you can see, finally, remember you can always get a free sample of Astroglide. We actually threw in this promotion after the AMA was over, because once the AMA was over, once questions were stopped being answered around like 11 that night, we added this in with the explicit intention of knowing it would be at the top of the page and we can direct traffic to a specific source without looking too spammy, right? We've given the community a lot of value. We know no one's going to complain about it, and no one did. And this was an easy way to spike traffic to this particular page. So, answering questions. What do you need to know about answering questions? Well, Dr. Jess is actually probably the best example. And if you want to see how she answered these questions, I would strongly suggest going to this AMA itself, which is actually going to be linked in the comments of this video, so you can see it for yourself and you can kind of page through this thread. But even if you just click her username right here, and you look at some of the comments that she did, or you can just scroll down and any of the comments that are highlighted, you can see these are hers. I'm going to tell you right now, she did a fantastic job. And what you can see here is that she didn't just respond to the questions themselves. She also jumped in, right? And she jumped in naturally. Dr. Jess is not someone that uses Reddit all the time, and so she's not super familiar with the community, but she was just herself. She didn't try to be someone that she wasn't. She just kind of participated. And so you can see, something, people made jokes, right? And then she kind of jumped into the jokes itself. You can even see someone mentioned that this is the most playful answers I've seen in an official AMA. People obviously like that. You can see that she said, I'm supposed to be answering Qs, but all these answers are too funny not to read, right? People like that. People like when you're human. People like when you're a little vulnerable on Reddit. And so if you're willing to show that, fantastic. Then you can see she gives really long thought out answers. I'm going to scroll down. You can see she's giving answers. She's even citing things here, right? I'm going to keep scrolling down. Once again, good answers. She drops an answer in here, right? Once again, she's not just responding just to the top level comments, she's also tossing in some stuff into the actual thread itself. She's responding to people that are responding to her. You can see some more stuff. She's plugging, Astroglide, or she's thanking people for plugging Astroglide. You can see more long answers, etc., etc., etc. What you're going to kind of get here, if you go through this thread and you look through the answers, is that she is answering everything. She's going through and she's answering everything, right? And she's doing a great job of that. The other thing that she's doing is she's participating. You don't have to make every answer a long answer. Some are shorter, some are quicker. You really need to just come in with the idea of you want to answer questions and you want to answer them appropriately. Think of it like a conversation. Not every question someone asks you in a conversation is going to be a novel that you're going to hand them, right? And not every, it's not going to be appropriate if someone asks you a deep question and you just kind of say to them, yes, right? That's not going to fly. But you can kind of see this is how she answers them. Now, on the other side of things, for the other AMA now, and this is how not to answer questions in your AMA. So I've actually had to scroll pretty far down here to actually get to questions that were answered. You can see where I am, right? I had to scroll down to literally the negatives. And the reason why is because people do not like these questions. So what we're going to start with here is, first off, the questions. Love all the gear I have. How do you guys think about professional sponsorships? Do you think you will have your own athletes someday? Right? This is obviously a question that is like super marketing friendly copy, but you can look at the questions that or the way that they even answer these questions. Right? We're always looking for great inspirational guys to be part of the community. This doesn't sound like how a real person would answer this question. It sounds like a PR person, and that's not what's effective in an AMA. You have to sound like a real person. You have to sound like someone that's not just a PR person. Contrast this with how Dr. Jess was answering questions like a person. Sometimes she would just answer by saying LOL, right? That's how a person would answer something. If someone's making a joke at you that you find funny, or if they were asking a question, you don't want to be a robot, right? This other question, right? Once again, I'm trying not to focus on these planted questions too much because they're really obvious, but like, this, thank you so much for the feedback. We totally hear you. In upcoming seasons, blah, 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 we'll be launching a new seamless that comes in solid colors. Like, they're just talking about their brand. They're not really engaging. There's not much to engage on anyway because of the questions. I promise I'm not going to talk about these too much, but like, they're just being a brand. They're not being a person. Another great example of this is actually this Nate and Kyle are the new Finance Promotion in Boston store. And you look down. First off, what up, Will? This guy never. I prep myself when doing these videos, and I went in looking at this, and where does he say his name is Will? Does this username say Will? I don't get it. I don't get it. Why is he saying Will? This kind of hints that maybe he knows him. That's not a good thing to admit to in an AMA. But yeah. As someone born in Boston, it's definitely at the top of my list. These are so public relations friendly answers, right? And one of the things you also notice is not only the public relations friendly, but like even if they were, this isn't like there's a lot of questions in this thread, and they're explicitly picking ones out that were probably planted, but are like asking directly about their products. There's not a lot here that's actually interesting. Who cares, right? Oh, who cares that your pants were named after your grandfather who taught me how to swim? Nobody cares. Nobody cares, right? So yeah, you kind of get it. I don't want to rant too much, right? What gets you most excited about Rowan each day? It's the products and now the community we built. It's just, don't do this, guys. When you're hosting an AMA, you want to look like you're a real person. You want to look like you're having an actual communication with real people. You don't want to look like you're some guy standing there answering questions all buttoned up like, yes, this is our brand. Let me talk to you about brand. You don't want to do that. That's not what an AMA is there for. An AMA is there to honestly engage with your community in such a way that looks natural. Jumping back to the AMA here that we hosted, you kind of get a feel for it, right? It's about honesty. It's about being a real person. That's really what Reddit is about. You don't want to come off as essentially more or less, and I hate to say it, but come off as a fraud. You want to come off as, hey, we're really here because we really want to talk to people about this brand. That is the goal. That's what we're here to do. And if you can't do that, it's going to be hard for you. And this can also help you if you're watching all this and you're still not sure if your brand is right for Reddit. If you feel that you can't be honest about your brand, and if people ask you earnest questions, then you're going to have to keep up that like brand voice kind of thing. Then you're not going to be able to succeed on Reddit. And I know that sucks, but it's better to, honestly, it's better to kind of pass if you don't think that it's right for you. Because like I said at the beginning, if you do stumble, it can cause damage for your brand. So you really want to make sure that you are a good fit. And if you're not, then that's fine. This isn't the idea. This isn't ideally how you should be advertising your business on Reddit. Maybe try Reddit ads. Maybe try direct interaction with communities. But an AMA might not be for you. And that's basically it. That's all you need to know about Reddit and posting an AMA on Reddit. If you've got good preparation and you are a human that is not a total robot, and you have a brand that is willing to be vulnerable and is willing to engage Reddit, like I said, like a human, and not just like we are brand, we do brand things, then you're probably going to have some success on Reddit. If you aren't, one of those three things doesn't fit, then you probably won't. But earnestly, if those three things fit, then you're probably going to have success. Your AMA is probably going to be successful. And I say that as someone that has hosted many, many AMAs for many different brands on Reddit. Generally, if you think you're going to be successful, if you've done your homework and you've planned everything out, you're going to have success. Am I promising it to you? Obviously not. That's not how anything works in marketing, but there's a good chance that you will achieve some success. So finally, the last thing that I'll say is that, if you aren't active on Reddit as it stands right now, my advice would be before you host an AMA to get active, join some communities, use the website, get a good feel for what belongs there, and just figure it out. But yeah, if you have any questions, if you have any comments about this video, part of your package for owning this video is that you get to ask some questions. So feel free to send those over and I will answer those for you. But I hope this was helpful and I hope that you have some good luck on Reddit. If you found this interesting, you might want to join TCF's Rise and Convert class. This complete class will walk you through everything you need to know to handle your own SEO strategy. This class is taught by me, Chris Hornyak, and Carrie DePhillips, the founder of the Content Factory. We've used these strategies to generate millions of dollars for TCF, and we love to share them with you. Check the link in the description for more.